Get the owner here right. Now my father's voice cracked through the air like a thunderclap. The crystal glasses on the table trembled. We're long-time members, my mother added coolly, her tone the kind that could freeze a room. And we don't want to be disturbed. Every head in the restaurant turned. The murmur of conversation fell away, until all that remained was the hush of expensive discomfort. I sat perfectly still at the VIP table by the sea, my fingers resting lightly on the rim of my espresso cup. The breeze from the Atlantic brushed the edge of my linen dress. The manager, a young man in a dark suit, hurried over, eyes-wide, voice shaking. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," he said, carefully bowing slightly. "She's actually the new owner of this resort." The silence that followed was ocean deep. My mother's wineglass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. My father froze, mid-breath, eyes fixed on me as though he'd seen a ghost. For the first time in my life, they looked at me and had no idea who I really was. The morning had started like any other at the Hampton Seaside Club, all polished marble and polished manners. The air smelled of salt, citrus, and money. Silverware clinked in rhythm to a soft jazz trio. Sunlight filtered through the glass ceiling, hitting the champagne like liquid gold. I'd come alone, dressed in a simple white linen dress, hair tied loosely, no jewelry. The kind of outfit my family would consider careless. But I wasn't here for approval. I was here for clarity. My father, Charles Whitmore, had built half the luxury condos along the East Coast. To most people, he was the picture of American success, confident, commanding, generous when people were watching. My mother, Elaine, had perfected the art of social dominance, soft voice, sharp tongue. Together, they ruled their circle of privilege like a monarchy. And then there was me, the daughter, who didn't fit the portrait. I felt their eyes on me before they spoke. "Isabel, my mother," said the syllables, clipped and fragile as glass. "That's the Whitmore table." She gestured to the VIP section near the ocean front, as if I had mistakenly wandered into holy ground. "I know," I replied evenly. "I made a reservation." My father's brow furrowed. "That table is for members, not guests." "Then I suppose it's a good thing I'm neither," I said. He blinked, confused, but before he could ask, the waiter set down another menu, and the tension thickened. "Honestly," my mother whispered, not softly enough you'd think she'd have learned by now. My sister Victoria, seated beside them in a perfect pastel suit, gave a delicate smile. "She's just going for a casual look, Mom. It's very seaside." Her attempt at peace was as thin as tissue. "Casual," my father muttered. "She looks like she walked off a boardwalk souvenir stand." His voice carried far enough for nearby guests to glance up, pretending not to stare. "Dad," I said quietly, "maybe lower your voice." He turned toward me sharply. "Don't tell me what to do in a place I helped build." There it was again, that sentence I'd grown up hearing whenever he needed to remind me how small I was compared to him. The waiter returned to pour champagne. My mother waved him off. "Not for this table," she said, and the poor man froze mid-motion, uncertain whether to obey. I gave him a faint smile. "It's fine, I'll take one." "Isabel," my mother hissed, "don't make a scene." I looked at her, calm and steady. "You mean don't exist?" She blinked, startled. The waiter retreated as though escaping a storm. A couple nearby began whispering, eyes darting between our table and their phones. I knew what they saw: the Whitmores, one of the oldest real estate families in New York, having a public argument. It wasn't the first time. It was just the first time I didn't shrink from it. My father leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. "You never learn respect, do you?" "Respect," I repeated softly. "That's an interesting word coming from you." My mother sighed as though exhausted by my existence. "You should have called before showing up. We could have arranged something more suitable." "I didn't realize authenticity violated the dress code," I said. "This isn't about rules," my father snapped. "It's about reputation. You're embarrassing us." There it was, the word that had shadowed me my whole life. Embarrassing. I'd been an embarrassment when I left NYU, when I worked front desk at a mid-range hotel, when I refused to attend charity galas just to smile beside people who despised me. Every choice outside their script was labeled rebellion. Every silence was disobedience. And still I kept showing up. Isabel Victoria murmured, reaching for my hand. Maybe just move to another table. Please. Her voice trembled more out of fear of spectacle than compassion. I'm comfortable here, I said, pulling my hand back. Comfort isn't the point, my father barked. Presentation is. You can't sit here looking like that. Like what I asked. Like yourself, my mother said under her breath. Her tone was ice, but her eyes betrayed panic. The perfect mask of the Whitmores was cracking in public. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the marble. You don't want me here, I said quietly. That's fine. I didn't come to impress you. My father gestured for the nearest waiter. Get the manager. Now. The young man hesitated, uncertain whom to obey. My mother's smile turned brittle. Charles, don't. She's making a spectacle, he said. This club has standards. His voice grew louder, with each word feeding off its own authority. Heads turned. Glasses paused midair. The sound of the ocean filled the silence between us. The manager appeared moments later, nervous, polite. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore. What seems to be the issue? My father pointed at me. This woman is occupying a VIP table under false pretenses. Remove her immediately. I watched the manager's face as he turned to me, recognition dawning behind his professional mask. He straightened, his expression shifting from apology to quiet reverence. Miss Whitmore, he said, his tone formal, now she's actually the new owner of this resort. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. My mother's hand slipped the stem of her glass, snapping as it hit the floor. Champagne spilled like gold across her heels. My father's eyes widened, his lips parting, searching for logic in the impossible. What? He whispered. I met his gaze steadily. You wanted to speak to the owner. Now you are. He stared, unblinking. Around us, whispers spread like a tide. Did she just say she owns it? That's Whitmore's daughter, isn't it? How ironic. Every voice in the room became a mirror, reflecting his humiliation. I leaned slightly toward him, my voice low enough for only him to hear. You always told me, power is about presence, Dad. Looks like I finally learned. The color drained from his face. My mother pressed a trembling hand to her pearls, the ones she never removed even to sleep. Isabel, she breathed. What have you done? I straightened. Built something you can't control. The manager stepped back, unsure whether to intervene. My father pushed his chair away, the legs screeching against the marble. This is a mistake, he muttered. Some kind of cruel joke. But even as he said it, his reflection in the glass showed a man unraveling, reputation cracking under the weight of truth. I reached for my espresso, calm as the sea outside, and took a slow sip. It's not a joke, I said. It's just justice. Around us, the hum of conversation started again, cautious and curious. Someone raised a phone. Someone else whispered my name. My father's world, the one built on appearances and control, had finally collapsed under its own perfection. I set the cup down gently, the porcelain click echoing louder than his voice. The sunlight caught the edge of the table, glinting across the spilled wine like blood turned gold. I stood, smoothed my dress, and looked at the two people who had spent a lifetime mistaking silence for weakness. Excuse me, I said softly. I think I'll take a walk. I turned toward the terrace, the ocean wind cool against my face. Behind me, my father was still frozen in place. My mother bent over the broken glass, trying to pretend it wasn't there. As I stepped outside, the sound of waves filled the air again. The sky was a perfect blue, uncaring and endless. I let the door close behind me, sealing the noise of their embarrassment inside. For years they'd taught me that belonging was a privilege they could give or take. But as the breeze lifted the hem of my dress, I smiled to myself, knowing the truth they could never grasp. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And I just earned mine in front of everyone who ever doubted me. I left the Whitmore house with a suitcase that weighed less than the silence behind me. The gate closed with the finality of a verdict. It was a bright spring morning, but the air felt heavy thick with things unsaid. My mother stood at the top of the stone steps, her hands clasped in front of her like she was posing for a portrait. She didn't say goodbye. My father stood beside her, perfectly framed in the doorway, expression carved in disdain. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time," he said, voice cutting clean through the sunlight. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just walked down the long driveway, past the roses he imported from France, past the marble fountain he called a legacy, past everything that had never really belonged to me. The cab waited at the gate. I told the driver to keep going even after we cleared the city limits. I didn't want to see the house shrink behind me. I just wanted it gone. Providence was colder, rougher, and real in a way Manhattan had never been. The first night I stayed in a cheap motel near the harbor, its carpet smelling faintly of salt and mold. I had $200 to my name, and no plan except to start somewhere small. The next morning I circled job listings in the newspaper, my fingers smudged with ink. When I walked into a seaside hotel to apply for a front desk position, the manager barely glanced up. "We don't usually hire students," he said, scanning my resume. "I'm not a student anymore," I replied. He gave a disapproving look, but after a pause, handed me a uniform 2 sizes too big. "You start tomorrow. Don't be late." The first week nearly broke me. Guests snapped their fingers for attention, threw keys on the counter, and called me sweetheart when they forgot my name. I learned to smile through insults, to apologize for things that weren't my fault. One afternoon, I spilled coffee on a guest's designer coat and spent an hour crying in the staff restroom. But I came back the next day, hair tied, smile, fixed, voice steady. I wasn't there to please anyone. I was there to survive. By the second month, I had memorized every system in that hotel. I knew which lights flickered, which rooms had leaking faucets, which guests tipped, and which didn't. I learned to fold towels so tight you could stack them like paper. When the night shift clerk quit without notice, I volunteered to cover his hours. The manager smirked and said, "You think you can handle that?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Watch me." 6 months later, I could handle anything. I didn't just manage reservations, I fixed problems before they happened. I kept the lobby spotless, the schedules running, the guests returning. People started to notice. Even the manager, reluctant at first, began to rely on me. One evening, he said almost grudgingly, "You've got a good head for this business." I smiled, but inside I thought, "You have no idea what I've had to learn to earn that sentence." Then the past found me. One weekend, a guest checked in under the name Mr. and Mrs. Halpern. I recognized them instantly, friends of my parents. My stomach turned as soon as they looked up. "Isabel," Mrs. Halpern said, her voice sharp with surprise. "Goodness, what are you doing here?" I straightened my uniform. "Working, ma'am." Her lips pursed like she'd bitten something sour. "Your parents didn't mention this." The next morning, the manager called me into his office. "Apparently your family's prominent," he said carefully. "They called to complain. Something about how this isn't the right environment for you." I stood silent while he fumbled with his words. "You're hard-working, but, well, we can't afford bad press." I left without arguing. Outside, snow was beginning to fall. I walked 3 miles home because I couldn't afford a cab. That night, I promised myself one thing: I'd never let their shame dictate my worth again. A month later, I found work at a smaller inn by the water, 12 rooms, no glamour, just creaking floors and chipped paint. The owner, an old widow named Mrs. Howard, paid me in cash every Friday and taught me everything she knew about hospitality. "People remember how you make them feel," she said. "That's the real business." I believed her. I worked double shifts, cleaned rooms, managed bookings, and took classes online in hotel management at night. The exhaustion was constant, but it was a clean kind of tired, the kind that came from building, not begging. One stormy evening, a guest arrived after midnight. She was tall, silver-haired, dressed in a travel coat still damp from the rain. The system had crashed, so I checked her in, manually apologizing for the inconvenience. "No apology needed," she said, watching me type. "You're very composed for someone under pressure." I smiled faintly. "Pressure's familiar." She tilted her head. "How long have you been running this place?" "I don't run it," I said. "I just keep it from falling apart." Her name was Catherine Adler, and she stayed for a week. Every day she asked questions that no guest ever asked. "Who trains your staff? What's your average occupancy rate? How much control do you have over pricing?" I laughed at first, thinking she was just curious. Then, she handed me her business card on her last day. "Atlantic Crown Group Executive Board. Call me when you're ready to stop fixing other people's mistakes," she said. "Build something of your own." It took me nearly a year to find the courage to call her. By then, I'd saved every cent I could. Mrs. Howard sold the inn to a developer, and I walked away with 2 suitcases and a plan. I met Catherine at a small cafe in Manhattan. She listened quietly as I pitched the idea that had lived in my head for years, a coastal retreat that valued experience over status, where staff were treated like family and guests like humans, not credit cards. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said simply, "Find a property no one wants, something broken. We'll make it beautiful." 3 months later, I stood in front of a rundown inn in Montauk, with salt-stained windows and faded blue shutters. It was called the Blue Heron. The bank wanted to unload it fast. Catherine co-signed the loan and left the rest to me. I painted walls, scrubbed floors, replaced linens, negotiated supplier contracts, and built a small team of people who believed in second chances because they needed one too. The first season was brutal. The pipes burst, the roof leaked, and a hurricane nearly shut us down. But I refused to give up. I kept hearing my father's voice. "You'll come crawling back." Each time I fixed a leak, each time a guest smiled and said they'd return, I whispered to myself, "Not today." By the second year, the Blue Heron turned a profit. Guests loved its warmth and authenticity. Influencers posted photos calling it a hidden gem. Catherine returned one evening, walking through the lobby with the quiet pride of someone who'd seen a spark turn into fire. "You've done it," she said. "You built a place that feels human." I smiled. "I built a place where I finally belong." Soon investors started calling. I expanded Sag Harbor, then Nantucket, then Maine. Each property carried the same signature coastal beauty without arrogance. We called the brand Whitmore Coastal Holdings, not because I owed that name anything, but because I wanted to redefine it. I wanted the world to see it and think of something new: integrity, not inheritance. Through it all, I never told my family. Not once. They never asked. In their world, silence about me was easier than admitting they might have been wrong. Whenever society columns mentioned the Whitmores, it was always my father's developments, my mother's galas, my sister's charity boards. I was the invisible one, the dropout who had vanished quietly into failure. That invisibility was my weapon. 5 years later, an email landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Ocean Harbor Resort Private Sale Opportunity." The attached photo showed a familiar terrace overlooking the Atlantic. My breath caught. It was the same resort where my parents had spent every summer brunch, the same one where I'd been told to sit near the back. The once prestigious property was drowning in debt. I stared at the price, then at the logo. Hampton's Seaside Club. The timing was poetic. I called Catherine. "Do we take it?" I asked. She paused only a moment. "Yes. Some stories deserve new endings." 2 months later, the deal was done. The contract bore my signature, Isabel Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Coastal Holdings. No middlemen, no whispers, no approval. The club that had once defined my family's superiority now belonged to the woman they'd dismissed. I didn't announce it. I didn't need to. I walked the marble terrace at dawn barefoot, the same way I had years ago when I was told I didn't belong. The waves rolled gently against the shore as if the ocean itself approved. I didn't feel revenge then. I felt peace, the quiet, steady kind that comes from knowing you've rebuilt what once broke you. That evening, Catherine joined me for dinner at the resort's rooftop. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Different," I said, "like standing in the same place but breathing for the first time." She nodded. "You've earned this. Don't let anger steal it back." When she left, I lingered by the railing watching the lights ripple across the water. Somewhere in the distance, I could almost hear my father's voice, polished, powerful, dismissive. "You'll come crawling back," I smiled faintly. "You were half right," I whispered. "I came back, but I'm the one standing." The tide shifted below, carrying the reflection of the new sign glinting above the entrance, Whitmore Coastal Holdings Ocean Harbor Resort. I built everything they said I never could. And soon, without even knowing it, they'd be dining under my name. The email arrived just after midnight. The subject line was short, almost forgettable: Ocean Harbor Resort private sale opportunity. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another investment pitch. But something about the name stopped me. I opened the attachment, and the image appeared: a wide terrace overlooking the Atlantic. The same glass railings, the same curved staircase I had climbed as a teenager, only to be told not to sit too close to the member tables. The logo had changed, but I would have recognized that view anywhere. Ocean Harbor, my family's pride, my personal humiliation. Now it was quietly up for sale. For a long minute I just stared at the photo. The resort looked tired, worn down by years of luxury turned neglect. The marble had lost its sheen, the fountains dry, the membership shrinking. But I didn't see a dying empire. I saw potential. I saw symmetry. Life had a strange way of handing you the very things you once thought were forever out of reach. I smiled and forwarded the email to Catherine with a single line: "Let's talk." By the time the sun rose, we were on a conference call. Catherine's voice was calm, analytical as ever. "It's a risk. The property's reputation is in shambles, but if anyone can turn it around, it's you." Ethan joined in from another line, his tone pragmatic. "It's undervalued. The current owners need cash fast. If we move quickly, we could close before the season starts." I listened to them talk numbers, zoning, tax reliefs, but my mind was somewhere else. I could almost hear my father's laughter echoing through the dining hall, the clinking of champagne glasses, the soft tap of my mother's pearls against the glass when she leaned to whisper something cutting. I'd been invisible in that place once. Maybe that was why I had to buy it. Not out of revenge, but completion. The deal began like any other: quiet negotiations through attorneys, due diligence, late-night calls that blurred into dawn. But there was a difference this time. I wasn't just building a business. I was rewriting a legacy. Ethan handled the paperwork, Catherine oversaw valuation. I went to see the property myself. When I arrived at Ocean Harbor, it was a gray afternoon. The ocean was calm, the wind heavy with salt and memory. I walked through the deserted lobby where chandeliers hung half-lit and dusty. The carpet carried faint stains of time, and the once proud crest of the resort had faded on the wall. I ran my fingers across the railing where my father once stood, with his arm around my mother, shaking hands with board members. The echo of their voices seemed to linger in the marble. I whispered to no one, "You left your kingdom to decay." The general manager, a man in his 60s, recognized my last name when we shook hands. "Whitmore," he repeated. "Any relation to Charles Whitmore?" I smiled politely. "Distant." His shoulders relaxed. "You're the investor group, then?" "The truth is, this place needs someone who remembers what hospitality means. The last owners didn't care about guests-only profits." "I understand," I said quietly. "We'll restore it to something that feels human again." That evening I sat on the terrace and watched the ocean swallow the Sunday. I thought about how much had changed since the last time I stood there. A girl dismissed, replaced, unseen. Now, my name was on the contract, and no one knew it yet. 2 weeks later, I sat across from the bank representatives and signed the final papers. The ink barely dried before Ethan said, "It's official. Ocean Harbor is now part of Whitmore Coastal Holdings. Catherine placed a hand on my shoulder, her tone half warning, half admiration. You realize what this means, don't you? Yes, I said, looking out the window. It means the ghosts have new landlords. We celebrated quietly that night. No press release, no announcement, no reveal. I wanted silence, not secrecy born of fear, but control born of patience. Catherine understood. When it's time, she said, let them discover it themselves. Ethan laughed. That's poetic justice if I've ever heard it. I smiled. Not justice, balance. The next morning I began the renovation plan. We stripped away the heavy drapes, let sunlight back into rooms that hadn't seen it in years. We replaced marble with soft wood, changed the tone from exclusivity to warmth. The spa reopened, the marina was rebuilt, and the staff underwent training that focused on empathy, not etiquette. Every detail mattered. I wanted Ocean Harbor to feel alive again, not as a symbol of wealth, but of transformation. The rebranding came last. The new logo bore a single wave intertwined with the letter W. I signed off on it personally. Whitmore Coastal Holdings Ocean Harbor Resort. The name that once chained me now set me free. Months passed and the numbers spoke for themselves. Bookings doubled. Reviews called it a rebirth. Guests described the atmosphere as luxury, without judgment. It was everything I had dreamed of when I was scrubbing floors at Blue Heron, everything my parents would never have believed I was capable of creating. Catherine visited during the grand reopening. The lobby glowed under soft amber light filled with laughter and clinking glasses. It's beautiful, she said, and sustainable. You've turned their legacy into something kinder. I looked around, remembering the old days when I would have been hiding behind the service counter. Kindness was never part of their brand, I said. It is now. Ethan joined us holding a glass of wine. We're getting inquiries from investors Boston, Seattle, even London. They're calling you the woman who reinvented coastal luxury. Let them call me whatever they want, I said. I know who I am. But beneath the success, a quiet part of me waited. Not for praise or validation, just the inevitable. The Whitmores would come. They always came back to reclaim what they believed belonged to them. One afternoon, Ethan entered my office with his tablet. You'll want to see this, he said. On the screen was a headline, Ocean Harbor's legacy family to attend private brunch at newly restored resort. The article included a photo of my parents smiling, as if the world had never turned against them. My father had been invited by one of the old board members, unaware that the ownership had changed hands. I read the line twice, Charles and Elaine Whitmore to grace Ocean Harbor with their presence this Sunday. Do we cancel their reservation? Ethan asked carefully. I shook my head. No, confirm it. Make sure they get their usual table. He hesitated. Are you sure you're ready for that? I met his eyes. I've been ready for 12 years. The weekend came quickly. Preparations for the brunch were flawless. The terrace gleamed with polished silverware, the air scented with white lilies and sea salt. Every staff member knew their role, every detail choreographed. Only Catherine understood the weight of the day. She stopped by that morning, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. You don't owe them a performance, she said. I'm not performing, I replied. I'm reclaiming. She smiled faintly. There's a difference between revenge and closure. I know, I said. That's why I'm not going to say a word. They'll do the talking. The truth will do the rest. I spent the morning watching from my office balcony as guests began to arrive. My parents' car pulled up around 11. I recognized it instantly, the same black Bentley that used to take me to school, the same one they never used to pick me up when I needed them most. My mother stepped out first, elegant in her pale blue suit, her posture unshakable. My father followed, shaking hands with staff who didn't recognize him as anything more than another wealthy guest. Ethan appeared beside me. You don't have to go down there, he said quietly. I do, I said. This isn't revenge anymore. It's revelation. As they walked inside, my mother's laughter echoed through the lobby, sharp and familiar. I felt no anger, only calm, almost pity. They thought they were returning as royalty. They had no idea they were entering my house. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone on the terrace. The sky was streaked with violet, the air still heavy from the afternoon heat. Somewhere below, the waves broke softly against the shore. I thought about the years it took to get here, the mistakes, the loneliness, the exhaustion, and now the symmetry. They once made me feel small here. Soon they'd know how small pride could become when truth stood beside it. I lifted my glass toward the horizon. The reflection of the moon shimmered in the water, steady, unbroken. This time I whispered to the ocean, they'll ask to speak to the owner. And I'll be right here. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked neatly between real estate magazines and unopened bills. My mother found it first. She sat at the breakfast table, the steam from her coffee curling around her pearls as she read it aloud. Ocean Harbor Resort, she said, her voice rising with curiosity. Grand reopening. Invitation only. My father looked up from his newspaper, unimpressed, until he caught the bold gold lettering at the top, Whitmore Coastal Group. Whitmore, he said, brows tightening. Interesting name choice. Probably some young investor trying to sound established. My mother smiled, delighted by the coincidence. They must know of us. Look, it's signed with great admiration for your family's legacy in real estate. She looked almost flattered. They're inviting us as honorary guests, Charles. He leaned back, satisfied. About time someone remembered who built that coastline. I heard all this later, of course. Ethan was the one who told me, his voice filled with dry amusement. They fell for it instantly, he said. Your father already confirmed attendance. Your mother asked if she can bring a guest list. I laughed softly. Of course she did. Ethan hesitated. Are you sure about this? You really want them here? Yes, I said. They'll come expecting admiration. What they'll get is perspective. The resort was nearly ready. The renovations had transformed Ocean Harbor into something alive again, brighter, warmer, less like a museum of money, and more like a place for people. The marble floors gleamed, but not ostentatiously. The staff moved confidently, greeting guests with ease instead of deference. Every detail reflected my design, from the open terraces that captured sunlight to the new logo, etched subtly onto the glass doors, Whitmore Coastal Holdings. Catherine visited that afternoon, watching me as I adjusted a centerpiece on one of the tables. So she said the famous Whitmores are attending your opening brunch. Apparently yes, I replied, aligning the white orchids. It feels poetic, doesn't it? She tilted her head. Poetic can turn dangerous if it's written in anger. I smiled. Then it's a good thing this isn't about anger. You're sure, she asked, studying me. You're not just proving them wrong. No, I said, I'm proving myself right. The day before the event, the air in the Hamptons hung heavy with anticipation. The newspapers called Ocean Harbor's relaunch the rebirth of East Coast luxury. None of them knew that the real story wasn't in the decor or the guest list. It was sitting at the heart of one family's history. At home, my parents were preparing for their big return. My mother spent the morning choosing between two gowns, one ivory, one lavender. We need to look refined, not desperate, she said to my father. He didn't answer, busy calling old friends to tell them he'd been personally invited by the new ownership. They clearly value legacy, he said proudly. We'll remind everyone the Whitmores still matter. My sister Victoria stopped by to drop off some papers. Are you sure you should go? She asked quietly. It's odd the company named the invitation all of it. My father laughed. Coincidence. The new management probably admires our work. Maybe they even studied under me. Victoria didn't press further, but later she texted me, they're coming. You really want to do this? It's time, I replied. They've built walls long enough. Let them see who owns the foundation now. By sunset, I walked through the resort one last time. The evening light poured through the windows, painting the hallways gold. Staff rehearsed greetings, the kitchen hummed with precision, and the terrace gleamed ready for the morning's crowd. I paused at the edge of the grand dining hall, the same one where my father once raised his glass to celebrate his first development deal. Back then, I was a shadow behind a velvet rope watching from afar. Now I stood in the center, the chandeliers reflected in the polished marble beneath my feet. Everything had come full circle. Ethan approached, clipboard in hand. Tomorrow's schedule is set. Press at 10, guests at 11. Your parents' reservation confirmed, table 1, seaside view. He hesitated. Do you want to move them? No, I said. That's their table. It always was. He nodded slowly. You're calm. I've waited 12 years, I said. Calm is all that's left. That night, sleep came in fragments. I dreamt of the old ocean harbor, of standing barefoot on the terrace. My father's voice echoing, "You'll never understand legacy." I woke before dawn, the sound of the waves steady outside my window. The horizon was pale pink, the sea shimmering like glass. It felt like the world was holding its breath. When morning came, the resort came alive. The scent of freshly baked bread and sea air mingled as staff arranged final touches. The band rehearsed soft jazz near the patio, and the sunlight spilled across the water like liquid silver. Guests began to arrive, investors, journalists, socialites, all eager to see the resurrection of a legend. And then just past 11, the Whitmore car appeared. The black Bentley glided up the drive, polished as ever. I watched from the mezzanine as my parents stepped out, photographers snapping their arrival. My mother smiled for the cameras, radiant in her lavender dress. My father looked every bit the patriarch he imagined himself to be, adjusting his cufflinks like armor. They entered the lobby, greeted by staff trained to perfection. "Welcome to Ocean Harbor, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore," the concierge said, bowing slightly. "It's an honor to have you." My father puffed his chest. "You've done a fine job restoring this place. I used to advise the original board, you know." The concierge smiled politely. "We're aware, sir. The new owner values your legacy greatly." I watched their faces brighten at that line. They believed every word. Victoria arrived soon after, hesitant but elegant, her expression guarded. When she spotted me at the balcony above, she froze for a moment, then gave the faintest nod, a silent warning, or perhaps understanding. By noon, the dining hall was full. The terrace doors were open, the ocean breeze threading through laughter and conversation. My parents sat at their favorite table by the railing, glasses of champagne in hand. They looked completely at home. Catherine joined me at the edge of the balcony, watching from a distance. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. "I don't think anyone ever is," I said. She touched my arm. "Whatever happens, stay still. Power doesn't shout." I nodded. Below us, the manager approached my parents' table, offering his greetings. My father, enjoying the attention, gestured broadly around him. "We practically built this place's reputation, you know. The Whitmore name meant something here?" The manager smiled. "It still does, sir." He walked away, leaving my parents preening. My mother lifted her glass, admiring her reflection in the stem. "It feels good to be back where we belong," she said. "People remember quality." I stepped back from the railing, heart steady. The time wasn't yet, it would come naturally, as truth always does. That evening, after the last guest left, I walked alone through the silent hall. The lights glowed softly, the faint scent of lilies still in the air. The tables were cleared, the laughter gone. I stopped by the railing where my parents had sat, the same spot where I once watched the sea through tears of humiliation. Now the only sound was the tide rolling in, and the hum of a world that had shifted beneath us. Catherine found me there, her heels soft against the marble. "It's done," she said. "They came, they saw, and tomorrow they'll realize whose name is on the deed." I nodded. They wanted legacy. I gave them truth. She smiled gently. "And what will you give yourself?" I looked out over the water, the sky fading into dusk. "Peace," I said. "Just peace." The horizon darkened, the waves gleaming under the rising moon. Tomorrow they'd ask to speak to the owner again, demanding answers, demanding respect, and this time I would be waiting. The morning sun glimmered over the water like melted glass when the Whitmores arrived for brunch. Cameras clicked at the gates, reporters pretending not to recognize them but snapping pictures anyway. The return of Hampton's royalty, one of the photographers whispered. My father adjusted his jacket, pleased by the attention. My mother smiled, gracious and cool, the picture of practiced elegance. They had no idea the stage they were walking onto wasn't theirs anymore. Inside, the jazz band played softly near the terrace. The tables were draped in white linen, polished silver catching the light. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved like a well-rehearsed dance. The air smelled of sea salt and coffee mingled with the faint sweetness of lilies. It was everything my mother loved and everything I used to fear. From the balcony above the dining hall, I watched as they entered. My father nodded curtly to the hostess, expecting recognition. My mother leaned close to him, whispering something about the decor. They've done a lovely job, she said, her tone approving as if giving permission for the space to exist. The Whitmore table as usual, my father announced to the hostess. She smiled professionally and led them to the table closest to the sea, right where he'd demanded to sit every summer. It was waiting, glistening in the sunlight, prepared exactly the way he liked. They sat comfortable in their assumption of ownership. My father signaled for champagne. My mother glanced around the room with detached satisfaction, soaking in the glances from the guests nearby. I could almost hear her thoughts. See? They still know who we are. Victoria followed them, looking uneasy. She caught my eye from across the terrace and gave me a small nod, a warning maybe, or a plea. I nodded back. The moment had arrived. Ethan appeared beside me, murmuring, "Everything's ready downstairs." His voice was calm, steady. "You don't have to do this yourself, you know." "I do," I said quietly. "They took away my voice once. I'm taking it back in person." Down below, my father gestured to a waiter. "The champagne's warm," he said sharply. "Bring a new bottle." The waiter nodded politely and turned away. My mother reached for her pearls. "Charles, relax. It's a resort, not a courtroom." "It's about standards, Elaine," he replied, his voice carrying farther than he realized. "People notice when service slips." The guests at nearby tables exchanged glances. I descended the stairs, heels clicking against marble. The sound turned heads. My father didn't notice at first. He was too busy inspecting the label on his new bottle of champagne. My mother saw me first, her expression flickering between confusion and recognition. "Isabel," she said, the name soft but edged with disbelief. I stopped by their table, sunlight spilling over my shoulder. "Good morning," I said. My father looked up. His face froze. "What are you doing here?" I smiled faintly. "Having brunch." He frowned, his tone sharp. "This table is reserved for members." "I know," I said, taking the seat across from them. "It's a beautiful view." My mother's hand tightened around her glass. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in the lounge area, dear. I'm perfectly fine here." My father's voice rose. "You can't sit here, Isabel. This is private." The sound carried. People nearby began to glance over, whispering behind napkins. The music softened as if even the band sensed the tension. "I'm not causing a scene," I said calmly. "I'm sitting down." "You're embarrassing us," my mother hissed under her breath. "I'm sitting quietly," I repeated. "You're the ones raising your voices." My father slammed his palm against the table. The champagne glasses trembled. "Get the manager," he barked at a passing waiter. "Now, Charles, please," my mother whispered. "People are watching." He ignored her, already standing. "You never learn respect," he said to me. "You think walking in here like that makes you belong. You don't belong at this table." My pulse steadied. I had waited years for that sentence. The manager appeared composed, polite. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." "Is there a problem?" "Yes," my father snapped, pointing at me. "This woman is trespassing. Remove her immediately." The manager turned to me, his eyes calm, deferential. "Miss Whitmore," he said softly. "Would you like me to handle this?" My father blinked. "What did you call her?" The manager straightened. "Miss Isabel Whitmore, sir. The owner of Ocean Harbor Resort." For a moment there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just the collective breath of an entire dining hall suspended in disbelief. My mother's hand slipped, and her glass shattered against the marble floor. Champagne spilled like liquid gold across her heels. My father froze mid-breath, eyes locked on me. "What?" he said, voice barely audible. "You wanted to speak to the owner," I said softly. "Now you are." Gasps rippled through the room. Phones appeared discreetly in hands, cameras rising. Guests whispered first in surprise, then in awe. I could hear fragments. "She owns this place." "Isn't that their daughter? I thought she was a dropout." My mother stood slowly, her face pale. "Isabel," she stammered. "What have you done?" I met her gaze. "Built something you could never destroy." My father recovered just enough to bluster. "This is absurd. You're lying." The manager remained composed. "All records confirm the ownership transfer, sir. Miss Whitmore acquired Ocean Harbor last year through Whitmore Coastal Holdings." Every word carved into the silence like stone. My father looked around as if searching for someone to contradict the truth, but no one did. Even the waiter, who had once flinched at his tone, now stood quietly respectful but toward me. He turned back to me, voice trembling. "How could you afford by working?" I interrupted. "Something you never thought I'd do." A sharp intake of breath ran through the tables. My mother pressed her fingers to her temples, shaking her head. "You've humiliated us," she whispered. "No," I said. "I just stopped protecting your image." My father's jaw tightened. "We're leaving." "Of course you are," I said softly. "That's what you've always done when reality doesn't suit you." He glared at me, eyes blazing. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said. "It makes me free." He stood his chair, scraping back hard enough to screech. "Come, Elaine," he said. "We don't have to sit here and be mocked." But she didn't move right away. Her gaze lingered on me, uncertain, almost broken. "Isabel," she said quietly, "you didn't have to do this." "I did," I replied. "For me. Not for you." They left without another word. The doors closed behind them with a heavy thud that sounded almost like finality. The room stayed silent. Every eye was still on me. I looked around at the sea of faces, some curious, some sympathetic, a few quietly applauding. I stood slowly smoothing the front of my dress. "Please," I said to the manager, "make sure their bill is covered." He nodded respectfully. "Of course, Miss Whitmore." As I walked toward the terrace, the staff parted quietly to let me pass. The sunlight poured in warm against my face. I stepped outside, the sound of the waves steady and calm, the wind gentle. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt lighter than I had in years. Behind me the whispers began again, less gossip, more reverence. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. For once silence belonged to me. I stood by the railing, watching the horizon shimmer. Somewhere inside, a chair scraped a glass, clinked, and life resumed. The ocean rolled endlessly forward, indifferent but infinite. It wasn't victory I felt. It was freedom. And freedom, I realized, makes more noise than applause. By the next morning, the world had already decided what happened. A video less than 40 seconds long had gone viral overnight. Someone had recorded the entire scene, the argument, my father's raised voice, the shattered glass, and the reveal. The title read, "Family Argues at Luxury Resort, Turns Out the Daughter Owns It." By sunrise, it had been viewed more than 1,000,000 times. I sat in my office overlooking the ocean, the blinds half drawn against the glare. My inbox was flooded, news outlets, business reporters, morning shows, all asking for comments. Ethan stood by the window scrolling through his phone. "It's everywhere," he said. New York Post, CNBC, even BuzzFeed. They're calling it the Ocean Harbor Showdown. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the muted TV on the wall. The headline crawled across the screen: "Heiress turns tables on family in public feud." Underneath, my photo flashed mid-sentence, calm, unflinching. Next to it, a still image of my father, red-faced, shouting. The caption read, "Power, Pride, and Payback." Catherine entered, closing the door behind her. "You've officially become a symbol," she said, setting her bag on the table. "Whether you like it or not." I rubbed my temples. "What kind of symbol?" She smiled faintly. Depends on who you ask. Some say you're a hero. Others think you humiliated your parents for attention. The internet loves dividing saints and villains. I exhaled slowly. I didn't do this for attention. I know, she said. But that's not the story they'll tell unless you shape it yourself. Ethan glanced up. She's right. You can't ignore this. You have to make a statement. The word statement made me recoil. My father had built his empire on statements, polished, cold, manipulative ones. Every sentence he spoke in public was rehearsed, every silence calculated. I wanted no part of that, but I also knew silence was a weapon, and in the wrong hands it could be used against me. Catherine slid a folder across the desk. Marcus Lee. He's the best crisis consultant in the city. He helped half of Wall Street survive their scandals. He wants to meet you this afternoon. Scandals, I repeated, almost laughing. Is that what this is? Catherine's eyes softened. To them, yes. To you, it's just truth catching up. By the time Marcus arrived, the sky had turned a soft shade of gray. He was tall, immaculate, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. Miss Whitmore, he said, shaking my hand with practiced ease. Let me start by saying well done. Excuse me, I said. He smiled. You handled that moment better than any politician I've seen. Calm, composed, honest. You didn't overact. You let the silence work. That's rare. I crossed my arms. I wasn't performing. Exactly, he said. That's why it worked. Authenticity sells. Catherine arched a brow. Marcus. He nodded, softening his tone. What I mean is, you have an opportunity. This isn't just a viral video. It's a conversation. About legacy power class. People are responding because they see themselves in you. I don't want to exploit my family's humiliation, I said. You're not, he replied. You're reframing it. Right now your silence looks like guilt, but if you speak carefully, you can turn this into something bigger. A story about dignity, not revenge. I looked at Catherine. She nodded once. He's not wrong. Marcus pulled out a draft of a public statement. I scanned it silently. At Ocean Harbor, we believe in respect beyond appearance. Every guest deserves dignity regardless of status or attire. That's it, I asked. That's it, Marcus said. Simple, unapologetic. You don't attack anyone. You don't even mention them. You rise above. I set the paper down. And if they ask about my parents, he smiled faintly. Then you say this, I love my family. But I learned that love without respect can't survive. The line hit harder than I expected. I didn't say anything. Catherine placed a gentle hand on my arm. Say it once, she said. Then move forward. By the next morning, the statement was live. Ocean Harbor's official page carried the headline Respect Beyond Appearance. Within hours, it was everywhere, retweeted, quoted, dissected. News anchors debated whether it was a PR masterstroke or a moral lesson. Some praised me. She stood for integrity. Others sneered. She weaponized family trauma for publicity. I turned off the TV after the 5th segment. Ethan came in holding his tablet. You should see this. He handed it to me. The screen showed hundreds of comments, some cruel, some kind, most curious. Good for her. Finally, someone calls out hypocrisy. Ungrateful daughter humiliates her own parents. The contrast was dizzying. Catherine appeared in the doorway. You can't read those, she said. They'll poison you. I'm fine, I said, though my voice wavered. She looked at me for a long moment. You did what was right, Isabel. Don't let strangers convince you otherwise. But it wasn't the strangers I feared. It was the silence from home. 3 days later, the first response came not from my mother, but from my father's lawyer. A formal notice arrived, thick paper, expensive ink. Defamation, emotional distress, abuse of corporate power. He was suing me. Ethan read the letter twice before speaking. He's serious. Catherine's jaw tightened. He's not trying to win, he's trying to wound. I stared at the words on the page, each one colder than the last. He can't stand that I have control. This is his way of taking it back. Catherine nodded. Then we'd take it from him again, but cleanly. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on my balcony, the waves whispering below. The lights of the resort flickered gently across the water. I thought about my father's face when I told him the truth, how disbelief had cracked into anger, then humiliation. I thought about my mother, her glass trembling in her hand, her silence louder than his shouting. Revenge had always sounded thrilling in stories. In reality, it was exhausting. The next morning I walked into the boardroom where Catherine and Ethan were waiting. "We fight this legally," I said. "No interviews, no counterattacks, just evidence." Ethan nodded. "Jordan's already compiling records, meeting minutes, board filings, staff testimonies. We'll prove he has no case." Catherine leaned forward. "And what about emotionally?" I hesitated. "Emotionally," she gave a sad smile. "He's not fighting for money, Isabel. He's fighting for dignity. Don't let him decide yours." The case dragged on for weeks. My father gave interviews portraying himself as a victim of betrayal. My daughter misunderstood everything he said. Family should be private. The tabloids ate it up. But quietly his allies began to distance themselves. Old business partners declined to comment. Foundations withdrew his name. Meanwhile, Ocean Harbor thrived. Membership grew. Guests came not just for the view, but for what the place represented: renewal. One evening as I was leaving the office, Ethan stopped me. "You might want to see this." He handed me his phone. A clip of my father's latest interview was playing. The host asked, "Do you regret what happened?" My father paused. For the first time, he didn't look angry, just tired. "I regret forgetting that love isn't ownership," he said quietly. "I suppose she learned that better than I did." I gave the phone back to Ethan. "Do you think he means it?" He shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe he's realizing what pride costs when the cameras go dark." That night I stood again on the balcony, the wind colder now, the waves louder. The moon hung over the water like a coin tossed between forgiveness and distance. I didn't know which side it would land on. But for the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to decide it for me. I turned off my phone, silenced the notifications, and closed my eyes. The ocean roared, vast and indifferent. Freedom, I thought, is never loud. It's the quiet you choose after the noise fades. The lawsuit hit like a thunderclap. Whitmore versus Whitmore. The headline ran across every major business site before lunch. My father hadn't just filed a complaint, he declared war. The world called it a family tragedy. To me, it was predictable. Pride was his inheritance, and destruction was his way of passing it on. I sat in my office at the Ocean Harbor headquarters, watching the press conference replay on my computer screen. My father stood behind a podium, his lawyer beside him, cameras flashing in his face. "This isn't about revenge," he said, voice heavy with practiced authority. "It's about protecting reputation, about holding power accountable even when that power wears your last name." He looked directly into the camera after that, as if staring at me through the screen. My stomach turned. The man I'd once tried to earn love from was now selling my story for sympathy. Catherine closed the laptop. "You don't have to see this." "I do," I said. "I need to know how far he's willing to go." She studied me. "You already know. The question is, how far are you willing to go back?" I didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't know. The following morning we met with our attorneys. The conference room smelled of coffee and tension. Ethan had barely slept. "He's accusing you of abusing your power as owner," he said, flipping through the pages. "Defamation, emotional distress, misuse of corporate influence." I took the papers from him, scanning the lines without really reading. Every sentence felt like a cold knife. Catherine leaned forward. "He has no legal standing. Ocean Harbor's bylaws give you complete authority over membership policies. This isn't about law. It's about humiliation. He wants a public stage again." I looked out the window. The ocean glittered in the distance, beautiful and cruel. "He's always needed an audience," I said quietly. Even when he was tearing someone apart. Ethan sighed. "The media's eating it up. They're calling it the father-daughter feud of the decade. Half the internet thinks you're a hero, The other half thinks you're an ungrateful child." I smiled without humor. "That sounds about right." Catherine placed a folder in front of me. "This isn't just a fight for headlines. It's about reputation, yours, his, and the company's. If we stay silent, we let him define the narrative." I flipped open the folder. "So we don't stay silent. We worked late into the night. Ethan brought coffee, Catherine brought strategy, and I brought the one thing my father could never control: truth." By morning, Ethan had found what we needed. "You might want to see this," he said, dropping a stack of papers on the table. "Emails, internal memos, old financial approvals. Turns out your father used his position on the resort's advisory board to approve contracts for his friends without vetting or transparency." He handed me one document in particular. "This one's from 5 years ago. A construction company received a 6-figure renovation deal after donating to his foundation. No bids, no oversight." Catherine's eyes sharpened. "Classic abuse of influence." I stared at the letterhead. My father's signature gleamed at the bottom in perfect cursive. "He taught me to protect the family name," I said softly. "But he never protected it from himself." Catherine folded her hands. "If you bring this forward, you'll destroy what's left of his image." I met her gaze. "He already did that. I'm just making sure no one else gets hurt cleaning up his mess." The news broke 3 days later. A journalist uncovered the documents and published an exposé. Charles Whitmore, accused of nepotism and misuse of charitable funds. The internet turned on him almost instantly. The same faces that once smiled at his galas now avoided his calls. But instead of relief, I felt nothing. The victory tasted like ash. That night, Catherine came into my office. "You look like someone who just buried a war, not won it." I leaned back exhausted. Because I didn't want to win, I wanted him to stop. She sat across from me. "He won't. Pride doesn't stop, it burns until there's nothing left to feed it." I stared at the waves outside. "Then maybe it's time I stop feeding it too." The following week, our lawyers received a new motion my father wanted an emergency hearing. "He's desperate," Ethan said. "He's demanding public arbitration. He wants you there." I almost laughed. "He wants another audience." "Do you want to go?" Catherine asked. "Yes," I said after a moment. "Not to fight, to end it." The hearing took place in a small chamber downtown, far from the cameras and polished floors he was used to. My father arrived early, dressed impeccably, his lawyer whispering in his ear. When I entered, he didn't stand. He just looked at me with the same icy detachment he used when I was a child. The judge began with formalities, but I barely heard her. My father's gaze was fixed on me, full of disappointment and fury. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "You destroyed this family, Isabel. For what pride?" I met his eyes. "For peace," he scoffed. "You call this peace? You humiliated your own parents in front of the world." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself." I just stopped pretending it didn't happen. The room went still. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Whitmore, do you have any evidence that your daughter acted unlawfully?" He faltered just slightly. "Not unlawful. Unforgivable." The judge sighed. "That's not the same thing." After an hour of argument, the case was dismissed. Lack of evidence, lack of merit. I stood to leave, but my father's voice stopped me. "You think you've won," he said, "but all you've done is prove you're just like me." I turned to face him. "No," I said softly. "I'm what you could have been if you'd chosen love over control." For the first time, his face broke. His mouth opened, but no words came. The silence between us felt endless. When I walked out of that courtroom, the air felt different, sharper, lighter. But peace still didn't feel like victory. It felt like aftermath. Back at the resort, reporters waited by the gates. I didn't stop for questions. I just walked straight to the terrace and stood by the railing, the same spot where everything had started. The sea stretched out before me, endless and indifferent. Ethan found me there an hour later. "The news broke," he said quietly. "The judge dismissed everything. People are already calling it a redemption story." Redemption, I repeated the word foreign on my tongue. He nodded. Your father's gone silent. His lawyer withdrew. I think he's finally done. I looked at the horizon. The sky was gray, streaked with fading light. No, I said softly. He's not done. He's just lost the only language he ever spoke. Catherine joined us, her voice gentle. And you, I turned to her. I'm learning a new one. She smiled faintly. Which is peace, I said. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and rain. The first drops began to fall soft against the terrace stone. For the first time, I didn't run for cover. I let the rain fall, washing away the last traces of the storm that had defined my life. Freedom, I realized, wasn't the end of the fight. It was the choice to stop fighting at all. The boardroom had always belonged to him. The mahogany table, the city view stretching over Manhattan, the brass plaque by the door that once read Charles Whitmore, founding advisor. For decades it had been his throne room, a place where people lowered their voices and straightened their posture when he entered. Now for the first time his name was gone. The plaque had been replaced with one that read Isabel Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer. When I walked in that morning, every head turned. The air was sharp with tension and the faint scent of polished wood. The emergency meeting had been called less than 24 hours after the lawsuit's dismissal. Catherine sat at the far end, her calm composure steadying the room. Ethan stood by the screen papers neatly stacked in front of him. Across from me, my father sat in silence, his lawyer whispering something useless into his ear. Shall we begin? I said. My voice didn't shake. Catherine nodded. This meeting has been convened to address the board's confidence in current leadership and to clarify the integrity concerns raised during recent proceedings. My father gave a humorless laugh. Integrity concerns? You mean the smear campaign my daughter orchestrated? I leaned forward slightly. You mean the truth, he glared at me. You've made a spectacle of this family long enough, Isabel. Your behavior has cost us everything: respect, privacy, credibility. I met his gaze. You cost us those years ago. I'm just done pretending you didn't. The words hit like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Catherine remained motionless, watching. He rose from his chair. You think this seat gives you power. You think these people respect you. They're here because of what I built. And what did you build? I asked softly. A company or a monument to yourself? The silence that followed was heavy. He faltered for half a second before forcing a laugh. You sound just like the journalists. Do you really think they admire you? They see you as a scandal wrapped in pretty rhetoric. Ethan's voice cut in from the other side of the room. Respectfully, Mr. Whitmore, the numbers disagree. Profits are up 23% since Isabel took over. Membership renewals have doubled. Ocean Harbor's reputation has never been stronger. My father turned on him. You're just another one of her loyal pets. Ethan didn't flinch. I'm loyal to competence, sir. Catherine cleared her throat. Let's stay focused, the board murmured quietly. I could feel the tide shifting, subtle but real. He sensed it too. He sat again, face tight. I built this company from nothing. I gave it class, reputation, legacy. I stood placing a folder on the table. And now I'm giving it transparency. Ethan dimmed the lights and switched on the projector. The screen lit up with a series of emails and contracts, each stamped and dated. These, I said, are records from my father's tenure as advisor. He used his influence to approve contracts for personal acquaintances, some of whom were also donors to his private foundation. One of the board members, an older man named Russell, frowned. Is this verified? Catherine nodded. Every document has been reviewed and authenticated. Another slide appeared, showing a construction company's donation receipt matched against a no-bid contract approved by my father's signature. A murmur rippled through the room. My father slammed his hand on the table. This is manipulation. You're twisting numbers to make me look corrupt. I looked straight at him. You did that yourself. I'm just holding up the mirror. He rose again, voice booming. You will regret this. You're humiliating me in front of my colleagues. Not colleagues, I said quietly. Witnesses. The room froze. Catherine stood, her voice steady and precise. According to the bylaws of Whitmore Coastal Holdings, any advisor who leverages influence for personal or financial gain forfeits their position immediately. A vote of confidence may be requested at any time. One by one, the board members looked at each other. No one spoke. Finally, Russell cleared his throat. I think we've seen enough evidence to proceed. The vote was swift. Hands raised. Out of 15 members, 13 voted in favor of removal. Only one abstained. My father stared at them, disbelief etched into every line of his face. You're making a mistake, he said. You think she'll protect you. She'll burn this place down the moment you disagree with her. Catherine turned toward him, her tone polite but firm. No, Mr. Whitmore, she rebuilt what you almost destroyed. He looked at me, then really looked. The confidence was gone, replaced by something older and more fragile. You always wanted to see me fall, he said bitterly. No, I said. I just stopped trying to lift you up. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he straightened his jacket, collecting the papers in front of him with trembling hands. You think this makes you strong? It makes me accountable, I said. Something you used to preach but never practiced. He didn't reply. The sound of the chair scraping back was the only noise in the room as he turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped him. The door closed behind him with a dull final click. When the silence settled, Catherine exhaled. It's done. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like loss. Ethan broke the quiet. You did what you had to do. I nodded, staring at the empty chair he'd left behind. He built this company like a fortress, I said. All I ever wanted was to make it a home. The meeting adjourned, and people filed out quietly, leaving just the three of us. Catherine placed a letter in front of me, my father's resignation notice unsigned. Across the bottom, in his unmistakable handwriting, he'd written, Maybe now you'll understand what legacy costs. I folded the letter and slipped it into my bag. He's right, I said softly. Legacy always costs something, but I finally know what I'm willing to pay. Catherine rested a hand on my shoulder. And what's that piece? I said. Later that night, I walked through the empty corridors of the building. The walls still bore photographs of my father shaking hands, cutting ribbons, smiling for cameras. I stopped in front of one, the groundbreaking ceremony from 20 years ago. I was in that photo too, standing beside him, barely 20. Clutching a folder, smiling like I belonged. I remembered what he said that day, his hand on my shoulder. One day this will all be yours if you're smart enough to deserve it. I was, just not in the way he meant. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass, a woman who had fought through every version of his shadow and come out standing. Ethan met me at the elevator, his tie loosened, exhaustion written across his face. You okay? He asked. I will be, I said. The doors opened, and as I stepped in, I glanced back once more. The nameplate outside the boardroom door gleamed under the fluorescent light. Isabel Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer. For the first time, it didn't feel like a challenge. It felt like ownership earned, not inherited. When I left the building, the city air was cold, the streets washed in silver light from the skyscrapers above. I tilted my face to the sky and breathed. It wasn't revenge that had brought me here. It was justice, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't need applause. And as I walked away, I realized the legacy I wanted wasn't his. It was mine. The headlines called it the fall of a titan. My father's name appeared next to mine, two faces caught in one headline divided by truth. Every article framed it the same way, a dynasty undone by pride. The morning after the board vote, the world wanted to know how it felt to win. But winning wasn't the word that came to mind when I stepped into my office and saw the empty chair across from mine, the one he'd always used during meetings. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like silence. The phone on my desk wouldn't stop buzzing. Reporters, business analysts, even old colleagues I hadn't spoken to in years. I ignored them all. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see the ocean shimmering below, calm and indifferent. Outside, the world had already moved on to its next scandal. Inside, I couldn't stop hearing his voice. "You've become just like me." Ethan entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You didn't sleep." "Neither did you," I said. He gave a small smile. "That's different. I didn't have to dismantle a family legacy yesterday." I took the coffee, the warmth grounding me. "Family legacy," I repeated. Funny how that phrase always sounds noble until you realize it's just a cage with better wallpaper. He leaned against the window. "The stock's up 12%. Members are praising your transparency. From a business standpoint, you did everything right. And from a human one, he didn't answer." Catherine arrived a few minutes later, her presence steady as ever. "The board's pleased. Investors are calling you the face of ethical leadership." I looked at her over the rim of my cup. "I'm not sure ethical leadership is supposed to feel this empty," she sighed softly. "That's because integrity doesn't come with applause. It just comes with peace. Eventually." "Eventually," I echoed, staring at the horizon. That's a long word. The day passed in a blur of congratulations and silence. Flowers arrived, press statements were drafted, cameras waited outside the gates, and through it all, I felt nothing. Justice wasn't supposed to be hollow, but somehow it was. That evening, I drove out of the city toward the coast, where the air smelled cleaner and the noise faded. The drive to my beach house was quiet, just the hum of the tires and the sound of the waves getting closer. When I arrived, the sky was already dark, a sheet of deep indigo over the water. I stepped out, took off my shoes, and walked barefoot across the cold sand. The tide came in slow and steady, lapping at my ankles. It reminded me of the night I first left home, how I'd sworn never to look back. And yet here I was again, standing between everything I'd built and everything I'd lost. The next morning, Catherine called with updates, her tone efficient but gentle. "The public's reaction has stabilized. The scandal's dying down. People are moving on to the next headline." "Good," I said. "Let them." She hesitated. "You don't sound relieved." "I'm tired," I admitted. "I spent 12 years trying to prove I wasn't an embarrassment. Now that I've proven it, I just want to sleep." Later that day, Ethan came by with something in his hands, a printed article. "You should see this," he said. It was from a business magazine. The headline read, "She won the empire but lost the bloodline." I skimmed it, each word cutting deeper than the last. The writer described me as a brilliant, cold strategist who traded sentiment for success. I put the paper down. "They always find a way to turn dignity into cruelty." Ethan shrugged. "You can't control what they write." "No," I said. "But it's still strange how they define women like me. If I'd lost, I'd be foolish. If I win, I'm ruthless." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you're both." That made me laugh just a little. The sound surprised me. But when he left, the quiet returned, pressing against the glass walls of my office. The ocean beyond them shimmered endless and serene. I couldn't help wondering what he was doing, my father. Whether he was angry or broken, whether he hated me or missed me. I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, Victoria called. "He's not well," she said, her voice low. "What do you mean he's been avoiding everyone? Reporters, friends, even Mom. He barely leaves the house." "He's quiet. I've never seen him like this." I sank into my chair, closing my eyes. Quiet can mean many things. He's not angry, Isabel. He's lost. Maybe he finally understands. I didn't know what to say. The part of me that had wanted revenge should have felt satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. After we hung up, I walked to the window again. The horizon was glowing orange as the sun dipped lower. The world looked calm. My heart didn't. The next day, Catherine found me staring at the unfinished plans for a new project, a sustainable coastal retreat in Monterey. "You should focus on that," she said softly. "Turn the noise into something that matters." "I'm trying," I said. "But everything feels hollow." "Then fill it with purpose," she replied. "Use what you've built for good." That night I stayed late drafting the proposal for a new foundation, the Whitmore Women in Leadership Fund. It would support young women starting in hospitality, the kind who couldn't afford degrees or internships. I thought of myself at 20 sitting in a manager's office being told I didn't belong. This was for her. By morning, I'd signed the documents. Catherine walked in and read the file, smiling softly. "You're turning justice into legacy," she said. I looked at her. "No. I'm just making sure the next girl doesn't have to earn her worth through pain." For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. But peace is fragile. That evening, a courier arrived at the office with a cream-colored envelope, handwriting I recognized instantly. My mother's. Inside was a single note written in her perfect cursive. "He's not well. He wants to see you. Just once." I read it 3 times before I set it down. The air around me felt heavy, like the moments before a storm. Ethan found me still staring at the letter. "Everything okay?" I handed it to him. He read it quickly, his brow furrowing. "Are you going to go?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe you should," he said quietly. "You got your justice. Maybe now it's time for forgiveness." I turned toward the window, the waves below, rolling steadily against the shore. "Forgiveness isn't a gift," I said. "It's surrender." He studied me for a moment, then said, "Maybe it's both." When he left, I stayed there for a long time, the letter on my desk, the ocean outside whispering like it always had. The storm inside me began to shift. Not anger anymore, not even sadness. Something softer, heavier, like the ache of an old wound healing. By midnight, I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my bag. I didn't know what I would say when I saw him, or if I even could. But for the first time, I wanted to try. The tide rolled in, steady and patient, and for the first time in years, I let it carry me somewhere I didn't control. The letter smelled faintly of lilac and dust, the scent of my mother's perfume. Her handwriting, still precise after all these years, curved gently across the page. "He's not well. He wants to see you, just once." I sat at my desk reading the words again and again until they blurred into lines. Outside, the waves crashed against the shore, steady and indifferent. For days I'd told myself I'd moved beyond them, that what was broken didn't need fixing. But the letter sat there, patient as guilt. By the weekend, I was driving north through Connecticut. The road curved along the coast, lined with leafless trees and houses that looked smaller than I remembered. I hadn't seen my childhood home in over a decade. I'd imagined it as a monument to arrogance, polished, perfect, untouchable. But when I pulled into the driveway, the sight stopped me cold. The gardens were overgrown, the shutters faded, the gate rusted halfway open. Pride, it turned out, decayed faster than paint. I stood at the door for a long time, the letter crumpled in my hand. Part of me wanted to turn back, to let the past stay buried where it belonged. But curiosity, or maybe compassion, pushed me forward. When I knocked, I heard slow footsteps inside. The door opened. He stood there, smaller than I remembered. His once impeccable hair was gray and uneven, his eyes shadowed but clear. "You came," he said quietly. "I did." He stepped aside, letting me in without another word. The house smelled faintly of dust and old books. The furniture was the same, though the polish had dulled. Family photos still lined the hallway: my sister's wedding, my mother at charity events, me in my college sweater before I left. The same smile, frozen before everything changed. He led me to the study. The curtains were half drawn, the afternoon light spilling across stacks of papers. He sat slowly, motioning for me to take the chair opposite him. I didn't. I stood by the window instead, looking out at the garden. The rose bushes were dead, the fountain cracked. "I'm not dying," he said finally, his voice low. "At least not yet." I didn't ask. He gave a faint smile. "Still blunt, still honest," I corrected. We sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. "I saw the board meeting," he said. "Someone leaked the recording." "Of course they did," I said. "Everyone loves a fall from grace." He studied me. "You think that's what this is, I think it's what you made it." He didn't argue. Instead, he looked down at his hands. They were trembling slightly, the veins sharp against thin skin. I spent my life teaching people that legacy meant control, he said. That power was proof of purpose. I thought I was protecting what I built. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was building it for. I turned toward him. You wanted to be remembered. He nodded. And feared. I thought fear meant respect. It doesn't. He gave a small laugh, the sound dry and tired. You sound like your mother. She used to say that before she stopped believing it. I wanted to ask about her, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I said, "Why did you ask to see me?" He hesitated. Because I don't know how to undo what I've done. You can't, I said. That's the point of consequence. He looked up at me, his eyes damp but steady. Then maybe I can at least understand it. I sat finally, the chair creaking beneath me. Understand what? He took a deep breath. Why you left. For a second I almost laughed. You told me to. He winced. I didn't mean forever. Yes, you did. He didn't deny it. The silence stretched again, long enough for the clock on the mantel to fill it with its steady ticking. When I was young, he said quietly, I thought being right was more important than being kind. You taught me otherwise, though it took me years to realize it. You taught me that love is conditional, I said. He nodded slowly. And you proved that it doesn't have to be. For the first time, he looked at me not as an opponent or a disappointment, but as something human. He reached for a small envelope on the desk and slid it toward me. This is for you, he said. I hesitated before picking it up. Inside was a photo me at 18 wearing my graduation gown. He was standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder, both of us smiling. That was the last time you looked at me without anger, he said. I kept it to remind myself that I wasn't always the man who broke us. I stared at the photo. You could have been better. He nodded. I know. The admission hit harder than any defense. He leaned back, exhaustion lining his face. You built something extraordinary, Isabel. Not just a company, a life. I spent mine trying to prove I was powerful. You proved you didn't need me. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't want to prove that, I just wanted to be seen. His voice broke. I see you now. Something in me softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first step toward it. We sat in quiet for a while, the late light turning the room golden. Outside, the wind rustled through the dry branches. He spoke again, softer this time. Your mother was proud of you, even when she couldn't say it. She kept every article about you in a box upstairs. I looked up sharply. She did. She said, you got your stubbornness from me, he said, smiling faintly. But your courage, that was all her. The lump in my throat grew heavier. Why are you telling me this now? Because I don't want you to carry my silence any longer, he said. I want you to be free of it. I stood, the envelope still in my hand. I already am, I said. But I appreciate the gesture. He nodded, understanding. Then maybe I can rest easier knowing that. As I turned to leave, he said quietly, Isabel. I looked back. You were right, he said. Love without respect isn't love. It's possession. I wish I'd learned that before I lost you. For the first time in years, I smiled, not out of triumph, but recognition. Then, learn it now. He exhaled, eyes glassy. Maybe I just did. I walked to the door, my hand on the knob. Goodbye, Dad. He closed his eyes. Goodbye, sweetheart. When I stepped outside, the cold air stung my cheeks. The sun was setting bleeding gold across the sky. I walked down the driveway slowly, each step lighter than the last. Behind me, the house loomed in shadow, but it didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a place finally letting go. At the car, I paused. The photograph trembled slightly in my hand. I turned it over. On the back in faint ink, he had written, Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you repair before you go. I stood there, a long time, the wind tugging at my hair, the sea faintly audible beyond the cliffs. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a ceremony. It was a quiet surrender. a choice to stop bleeding from wounds that would never reopen. I got into the car and drove back toward the coast. The sky darkened, the ocean glinting in the distance. For the first time, I didn't feel like running from my past. I was driving through it on my way to something new. The sea looked different that morning, calmer, brighter, as if it had forgiven me too. The sun broke through a thin veil of clouds, scattering light across the glass windows of Ocean Harbor. For the first time in months, I didn't wake with the tightness in my chest. The house was quiet, the air soft with the scent of salt and something new, peace. I stood on the balcony, coffee in hand, and watched the tide roll in. Somewhere below, the staff were preparing for the day's event. Catherine had convinced me to host something special, the Whitmore Initiative, a new program dedicated to mentoring women in hospitality. When she'd first suggested it, I hesitated. "I don't want it to sound like a redemption campaign," I'd said. "It's not," she replied. "It's a circle. What you learned in pain, you pass on in strength." Now, as the waves reflected gold and blue, I finally understood what she meant. The morning unfolded with quiet purpose. Guests arrived one by one, students, managers, entrepreneurs, most of them women who had been told no too many times. Catherine stood near the entrance, her silver hair pulled back neatly, greeting everyone with the same grace she'd shown me years ago when she first said, "Build something of your own." When I walked into the lobby, a hush spread through the crowd. Cameras clicked softly, not the aggressive flash of tabloids, but the respectful glow of people who wanted to remember the moment. I smiled, nervous but steady. "Welcome to Ocean Harbor," I began, my voice carrying easily through the hall. "A place that once stood for exclusion now stands for opportunity. When I started in this industry, I was told I didn't belong. I believed that for too long. Today, I want to make sure no one here ever does." Applause rippled through the room, gentle but sincere. Ethan watched from the back, arms crossed, pride shining quietly in his eyes. Catherine nodded from the side, her expression unreadable but kind. After the speeches, the guests moved to the terrace for brunch. The tables were set with soft white linens and pale pink roses. The ocean breeze carried laughter, the sound blending with the hum of conversation. For the first time, Ocean Harbor felt alive in the way I'd always dreamed, elegant but warm, powerful, without pretense. I wandered between tables, greeting people, listening to their stories. Some talked about the challenges of balancing work and family, others about starting businesses with nothing but grit and hope. One young woman, no older than 22, told me, "My parents didn't think I'd make it. I watched your interview last year and it changed my mind about quitting." I smiled. "Then you've already made it. You chose yourself." She laughed, eyes bright. "Is that what you did?" "Yes," I said softly. Eventually, the day passed in a blur of sunlight and small victories. By afternoon, the event wound down, and the guests filtered out, leaving behind the faint hum of possibility. I stood on the terrace, letting the wind tangle my hair, when Catherine came up beside me. "You did well," she said. "So did you," I replied. "You built this with me." She shook her head. "No, you built it because you stopped trying to prove yourself. That's when real creation begins." I turned to look at her. "You sound like you've been waiting to say that." "I have," she said, smiling faintly. "I've seen a lot of people climb ladders that led nowhere. You built a bridge instead." Before I could answer, someone called my name from across the terrace. A woman stood near the bar, her face familiar, though older than I remembered. "Miss Whitmore," she said, approaching cautiously. "I'm not sure if you remember me." "Clara Jennings." The name hit me like a spark. Clara, the hotel concierge my mother had once dismissed years ago. "Of course I remember you," I said, taking her hands. "You worked at the Grand Haven." Her smile trembled. "I did, until your family decided I wasn't fit for luxury service. I wanted to say I'm sorry for the way they treated you too. Back then I didn't know how much courage it took to be different." I squeezed her hands. "You don't owe me an apology, Clara. If anything, I owe you a chance." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean? I've just acquired a property in Monterey, a coastal inn we're transforming into a sustainable retreat. I need someone who knows hospitality from the ground up. Someone like you." Her lips parted in disbelief. "You're offering me a job." "No," I said with a small smile. "I'm offering you a team to lead." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "After everything your family, after what my own bosses said." "I never thought." "Don't think I said. Build." She laughed through her tears, and I realized I'd never felt prouder of any decision. Not the deals, not the victories, just this. Passing something forward. Catherine watched from a distance, her eyes glistening. When Clara left, she said quietly, "You've turned revenge into renewal." "It wasn't revenge anymore," I said. "It was correction." Evening settled slowly, the sky melting into amber and violet. Guests had gone, leaving only the whisper of waves against the dock. I stood by the railing, the sea glowing beneath the fading light. Ethan came to stand beside me, hands in his pockets. "Monterey, huh?" he said. "That's a big step. Every step feels big when it's the right one." He smiled. "You sound like someone who's finally done fighting." "I am," I said. "For once I don't feel like I'm surviving. I'm living." He handed me a glass of wine. "To living, then." I clinked mine softly against his. "To peace." We stood there in silence, watching the horizon. I thought about my father not as the man who'd tried to destroy me, but as the one who'd unknowingly taught me the value of rebuilding. He had once told me that legacy was power. Now I knew better. Legacy was empathy that outlived pride. After Ethan left, I lingered alone. The staff were closing up, laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen. The night air was cool against my skin. I looked out over the water and whispered, "You were right about one thing, Dad. The world doesn't care about pride. It cares about what we build after it breaks." The wind carried the words away, soft and sure. When I turned to go inside, Catherine was waiting by the door. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked. "What's tomorrow?" she smiled. "Whatever you want it to be." I looked back at the sea one last time, the moonlight glinting off its surface like scattered silver. "Then I guess I'm ready," I said. And for the first time I meant it. The night was quiet except for the waves' endless, steady forgiving. It no longer felt like they were erasing the past. It felt like they were carrying it forward. The morning light spread over Ocean Harbor in slow golden ribbons, touching everything it once revealed in pain. The sea glimmered beneath it, calm and endless. The same sea that had watched me walk away from my family, the same that had witnessed me return. But today it wasn't about power or pride. It was about peace. I stood on the terrace barefoot, the boards still cool beneath my feet, wearing the same white linen dress from that day years ago. Back then, it had been an act of defiance, a symbol of everything they said I wasn't. Now, it was just fabric soft against my skin, carrying no weight but memory. The air smelled of sea salt and pastries, the same scent that had once filled the brunch crowd with laughter and judgment. But there was no crowd now, just a few early guests, quiet conversation, and the distant sound of waves against the dock. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged here. Ethan joined me with 2 cups of coffee, handing me one without a word. We watched the sunlight rise higher, gilding the tables and glass railings. "Full circle," he said softly. I smiled. "Except now I don't need their permission to sit here." He grinned. "You never did. You just thought you did." He was right. The club, the family name, the reputation, none of it had ever held real power. What mattered was the stillness I carried now, the quiet confidence that didn't need to be announced. As the morning crowd grew, I noticed movement near the entrance. My heart stilled for a moment when I saw them, my parents. They weren't dressed for a performance this time. My father wore a simple navy jacket, my mother a cream sweater that made her look smaller than I remembered. They stood just inside the doorway, uncertain, waiting. Ethan caught my glance but said nothing. I placed my cup down and walked toward them. The distance between us felt both endless and small. My father spoke first. "You've made it beautiful again," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. I nodded. "It was always beautiful. It just needed a different kind of care. My mother's eyes shimmered as she looked around. "We used to think this place was our legacy," she whispered, "but I think it was meant to be yours all along." I smiled faintly. Maybe it belongs to everyone who was ever told they didn't belong. She reached out hesitant, her hand trembling slightly. I took it just for a second. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was recognition, and that was enough. When they turned to leave, my father stopped. "Isabel," he said quietly, "thank you for making it something worth being proud of." "Pride's overrated," I said gently. "Peace lasts longer." They nodded, then walked out through the terrace door's sunlight, following them down the steps until they disappeared beyond the garden path. I stood there for a while, watching the horizon. The ocean shimmered the same shade of blue it had always been, but to me it looked different, wider, softer, forgiving. Later that morning, the new members of the Whitmore Initiative gathered near the terrace. Young women from all over, students, single mothers, hotel clerks, dreamers. Their faces were bright with hope and fear, the kind I used to carry. I stepped up to speak. "You're not here to become someone else's version of success," I said. "You're here to find your own." When I started, I thought power meant control. But it's really just freedom. The freedom to walk into a room like this one and not need permission to exist. They nodded, eyes wide, and I could see pieces of my younger self in each of them. "Respect," I said, "isn't given to you. You build it brick by brick, kindness by kindness. Even when it costs you everything, keep choosing integrity. The world will catch up." Catherine stood nearby, her arms crossed but her eyes bright with pride. When the applause faded, she came to me and said softly, "You turned revenge into renewal." "It was never revenge anymore," I said. "It was a lesson." The rest of the day unfolded gently. The guests mingled, laughter filled the halls, and the sound of waves kept time beneath it all. Ocean Harbor no longer felt like a stage for appearances. It felt like a living thing again, a place of second chances. As the sun began to set, I found myself alone on the beach. The tide rolled in slow and steady, wrapping around my ankles, warm from the dying light. The air tasted of salt and promise. I thought about everything, the arguments, the humiliation, the rise, the fall, the rebuilding. Justice had been my goal once. Then it became redemption. Now it was peace. I realized that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and sometimes it forgives. Ethan appeared behind me, his jacket slung over one shoulder. "You look like someone who's finally at peace," he said. "I think I am," I said. "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm fighting anymore." He smiled. "So what comes next?" I looked out at the horizon. "Whatever the tide brings." He nodded, leaving me to the waves. The last light dipped beneath the water, turning everything gold, then rose-colored, then dark. I walked farther down the sand where the surf met the rocks. The sound was hypnotic, almost like breathing. I stopped and turned, looking back at the resort. Lights glowed softly from the terrace, music drifting through the air. People were still laughing inside, their joy real, unforced. It struck me how far I'd come from that first brunch, that moment of public shame. Back then, I thought revenge would make me whole. But it was forgiveness, slow, reluctant, imperfect, that set me free. I knelt down and let the waves touch my hands. The water was cool, the foam white against the dark sand. "You were right, Dad," I whispered to the sea. "Reputation fades, but legacy stays." I stayed there until the stars began to appear one by one. The wind lifted my hair, the world hushed except for the waves. And I smiled, a small, quiet smile that carried everything and demanded nothing. I turned to walk back up the beach, the footprints behind me, slowly washing away. As I reached the terrace steps, the moon rose higher, spilling silver across the water. I paused, looking straight ahead, and said softly, "If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: peace isn't found in being right. It's found in letting go." Then with a small laugh, I added, "But tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away, or would you have stayed to rewrite the story?" The camera of memories seemed to pull back, the sea, stretching behind me, the resort. glowing like a lantern against the night. My voice lingered over the sound of waves. If you believe in justice, redemption, or the power to start over, I said, don't forget to stay with us. There are so many more stories waiting, stories of lost courage and the kind of strength that doesn't shout. I looked back toward the horizon where dawn would rise again soon. Because sometimes I whispered, peace is the most powerful revenge. The waves answered softly, and then there was only the sea, endless, forgiving, carrying every story home.